A Viking child could not afford to stay a child for very long. The world around them demanded too much too early. Long before adulthood arrived, children were already learning how to survive inside a harsh and unpredictable world filled with pressure, responsibility, and danger. But the Viking world was not an endless frozen wasteland like many people imagine today. It was alive. Green forests stretched across northern landscapes beneath heavy cloudy skies. Wooden villages stood beside rivers surrounded by hills, fields, and dark pine trees. Fishing boats moved slowly through quiet water during cold, rainy mornings. Smoke drifted upward from crowded settlements filled with movement, noise, and work. And inside those villages, children were constantly watching adults survive. That was their education. Not classrooms, not books. Reality. Young boys carried wood through muddy paths beside older men repairing tools and ships near the shoreline. Young girls helped prepare food, weave clothing, care for animals, and manage homes during long summer days filled with endless labor. Everyone contributed because survival in the Viking world depended on usefulness. A weak harvest could threaten entire communities. A violent storm could destroy fishing supplies. A single illness could spread quickly through crowded settlements. Children saw all of it, and because they saw it constantly, they matured differently from modern children. The Viking world did not separate childhood from responsibility. It connected them immediately. Children learned early that comfort was temporary, weather changed quickly, food supplies could disappear, family members sometimes left on voyages and never returned. That uncertainty shaped the psychology of Viking childhood from the very beginning. But it also created resilience. Children raised inside difficult environments often learn emotional control much faster, and the Viking world demanded emotional strength almost immediately. Because life moved quickly, responsibility arrived early, and survival never waited patiently for anyone to grow older first. Most Viking children likely began helping adults almost as soon as they became physically capable. Not because childhood lacked love, because communities depended on cooperation. Fields required constant maintenance during warmer months. Fishing nets needed repair beside rivers and coastal villages. Animals demanded care every single day. Work never fully stopped. And children grew up surrounded by that rhythm from the beginning of life. During summer seasons, settlements became filled with movement. Farmers worked across green fields beneath long northern daylight. Craftsmen shaped wood, leather, iron, and cloth beside crowded village paths. Merchants arrived carrying goods from distant regions. Children moved through all of it, constantly observing the adult world around them. That observation mattered, because Viking society passed knowledge through experience instead of formal education. Children learned survival by participating directly in daily life. A boy watching shipbuilders slowly understood how longships were repaired and prepared for travel. A girl helping manage household supplies learned how families survived difficult seasons through careful planning and discipline. Responsibility was not delayed. It was introduced naturally through daily necessity. But Viking childhood was not only about labor, it was also deeply connected to storytelling. At night, families gathered around firelight inside wooden halls, while older generations shared stories about voyages, raids, gods, monsters, revenge, courage, and survival. Children listened carefully. Those stories shaped identity. They taught values, explained danger, preserved family memory, and perhaps most importantly, they taught children how the Viking world expected people to behave during hardship. Courage mattered, loyalty mattered, strength mattered. But strength did not only mean violence, it also meant endurance. The ability to continue working during exhaustion, the ability to remain calm during uncertainty, the ability to survive difficult seasons without collapsing emotionally. Children growing up inside that environment learned quickly that life would constantly test them. And over time, many became psychologically older far earlier than modern societies usually expect. The Viking world rewarded resilience instead of comfort. Children understood that reality very early. A beautiful summer could still end in disaster if crops failed before autumn. A calm voyage could suddenly become dangerous if weather shifted without warning. A peaceful season could collapse into conflict between rival groups or local leaders. Uncertainty surrounded daily life constantly, and children witnessed the consequences directly. They saw exhausted farmers returning from fields during rainy evenings, watched adults prepare supplies carefully before long journeys, heard conversations about storms, trade, food shortages, and dangerous voyages across distant seas. Nothing about survival felt guaranteed. That changes the way young people think. Modern societies often try to shield children from stress and danger for as long as possible. The Viking world could not afford to do that. Children needed to become capable early because difficult environments punish dependence quickly. Even games often reflected preparation for adult life. Young boys practiced wrestling, balance, throwing, climbing, and physical competition through rough outdoor activities across forests, rivers, and open hillsides. Young girls developed practical skills connected to food preparation, textiles, household management, trade, and social responsibility. Everything slowly prepared children for adulthood, but another force shaped Viking childhood just as strongly: reputation. The Viking world cared deeply about honor and social standing. Families remembered insults for generations. Conflicts between groups could last for years. Stories about brave or cowardly behavior spread quickly across communities. Children grew up hearing all of it. That meant reputation became emotionally important very early. Young people learned that actions carried consequences beyond themselves. A careless decision could embarrass an entire family. Cowardice could damage reputation. Disloyalty could create dangerous enemies. That psychological pressure forced emotional maturity earlier than modern childhood usually requires. But it also created strong identities. Children growing up inside Viking society often knew exactly where they belonged, what their family expected, and how survival depended on trust, usefulness, and cooperation. The sea-shaped Viking childhood, even when villages were surrounded by forests and green hills far from major raids. Children watched ships arrive carrying stories from distant lands: England, Ireland, Eastern Europe, Iceland. Travel became part of imagination from a very young age. Some children dreamed about becoming traders or explorers. Others imagined themselves returning home with wealth, stories, and reputation after dangerous voyages. Because movement defined much of the Viking world, and children understood early that life might eventually pull them far beyond the villages where they were born. But the sea also carried fear. Every departure involved uncertainty. Families gathered near rivers and shorelines while ships prepared to leave during spring and summer mornings beneath gray northern skies. Supplies loaded carefully into wooden vessels, weapons secured beside shields and tools, relatives embracing one another before long journeys began. Children watched silently while adults prepared for departures that might become permanent. Some ships never returned. Storms destroyed crews. Conflict killed travelers. Disease spread quickly during distant journeys. The Viking world offered opportunity, but opportunity always carried risk. That lesson became deeply emotional for many children, because growing up in Viking society meant understanding very early that people can disappear suddenly. And yet life continued. Fields still needed planting. Animals still needed care. Villages still needed work completed before winter returned. Responsibility never paused for grief. That emotional reality forced children to mature quickly. But Viking communities also understood something important. People survived hardship more effectively together. Feasts brought communities together beside music, storytelling, food, and firelight during warm evenings. Festivals created moments of relief during difficult years. Families relied heavily on one another during hardship. Children learned early that survival was collective. No one remained strong alone for very long. That mentality shaped Viking society deeply. And perhaps it explains why so many Viking communities remained resilient despite the constant uncertainty surrounding their world. Even now, Viking childhood still feels fascinating because it reveals how differently human beings can grow depending on the environment surrounding them. The modern world often separates children from danger, responsibility, and uncertainty for as long as possible. The Viking world did the opposite. Children grew up beside reality from the very beginning. They watched adults struggle, work beside families daily, learn survival through participation instead of protection. And that created a very different type of psychological development. Children became emotionally tougher earlier, more independent earlier, more useful earlier. But that strength came with pressure modern societies rarely expect young people to carry. The Viking world demanded maturity because survival demanded maturity. A child unable to contribute created risk for the entire household. That reality shaped generations growing up across green northern landscapes filled with forests, rivers, villages, and dangerous uncertainty hidden beneath beautiful scenery. And perhaps that contrast is what makes the Viking world still feel so compelling today. It was beautiful, but never safe. Summer sunlight stretched across green hills while families quietly worried about failed harvests, violent storms, conflict, disease, or ships that might never return home again. Children absorbed all of it. The stress, the responsibility, the emotional discipline required to survive inside unstable environments. And over time, that pressure transformed childhood itself. Because childhood changes depending on what the world demands from people. The Viking Age demanded resilience. It demanded usefulness, endurance, emotional control, adaptation. And children learned those lessons very early, not through abstract teaching, but through daily life itself. Perhaps that is why Viking children often seemed older than their years. The world around them forced them to become stronger long before they were truly ready. And in a civilization built around survival, there was rarely another choice.